Welcome to part 2 of the National School Lunch Program overview. In this slide series, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the school lunch program and how it came to be. So before the official establishment, let's back up just a little bit. But before the establishment of a large-scale government-funded program like we have today, we really had small non-governmental programs that existed. As early as the late 19th centuries, cities such as Boston and Philadelphia operated independent school lunch programs with the assistance of volunteers or different charities. Until the 1930s, most school lunch programs were volunteer efforts led by teachers and mothers' clubs. During the Great Depression, the number of hungry children seeking food overwhelmed these lunchrooms. Thus, local programs began to look to state governments and then the national government for resources. The national government began providing funding for school lunches on a very small scale as early as 1932. This funding originated from the New Deal, agencies such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and the Civil Works Administration. The federal government monitored supplies from commercial farmers and purchased surplus commodities to provide to schools. And schools served as that outlet for federal commodity donations. In 1935, the program expanded through the Work Progress Administration and the National Youth Administration, both of which provided labor for school cafeterias. During World War II, the War Food Administration helped create school lunch programs. Eventually, the New Deal policies began to dissolve and farm surpluses decreased. However, there was still a desire to keep school lunch programs in place, so federal cash assistance began to be appropriated on a year-to-year basis. And at that point, the National School Lunch Program was determined and developed. So this led us to, in 1946, President Harry Truman establishing the National School Lunch Act, which safeguards the health and well-being of nation's children and to encourage the domestic consumption of nutritious agriculture commodities and other foods. As President Truman had noted that many of the men who had been rejected for service during the World War II draft were in poor health, and that poor health was associated with poor nutrition in their childhood. So this National School Lunch Act was to help provide nutritious meals for students as they were growing through adolescence in order to provide good nutrition to bolster the health of these men and help create stronger troops for future wars if that was so to occur. The school lunch program has grown to become the second largest U.S. food and nutrition assistance program in both numbers of children served and federal dollars spent. And about 60% of American children aged 5 to 18 participate in the program at least once per week. So there have been a number of changes made over the years since it was first developed in 1946. So the Child Nutrition Act of 1966 and later amendments to this act and the Child Nutrition Act expanded meal assistance with the addition of these 3 programs. So school breakfast program, summer food service program, and child and adult care food program. Then changes throughout the 90s through 2004 reflected health concerns for children and really focused more on the quality and the nutrients that were served in these meals. So Congress developed what was called the School Meal Initiative, or SMI, and required schools to provide meals that met the current dietary guidelines for Americans. To help with this, USDA developed a new menu planning system created by the Team Nutrition to help with these meal developments. Not all schools that were running the National School Lunch Program had experts in nutrition or knowing how to develop a menu that met specific dietary guideline requirements. So these tools were created to help schools ensure that they were meeting the guidelines. In 2004, the Child Nutrition Reauthorization included requirements of wellness policies that specific nutrition guidelines for all foods sold in schools. So this was above and beyond what was sold for just lunch or for breakfast. So if any meals were or snacks were served outside of those times, so say they had a snack available in between classes or maybe after school, these policies were specific to having nutrition guidelines for those foods sold anytime during the school day. So more recent timeline changes were made pretty significant in 2010. So you may have heard of the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. This was very much put into place by Michelle Obama and the Obama administration. And it made changes to the meal pattern and increased access to the program. It really did bolster the nutrition standards for meals and beverages served for not only the school lunch program, but both breakfast and snacks that might be served. It increased the amounts of fruit and vegetables that were served each week and limited the amount of starchy vegetables that could be served. It created age-specific recommendation serving sizes, and this had not been done previously. And they were only now allowed to serve low-fat or fat-free milk for lunch. Previously, schools could serve 2% milk if they so chose, but this lowered it to only serving low-fat or fat-free. It also required that they serve more whole grains, and it established standards for foods and beverages sold outside the breakfast and lunch program. And this went above and beyond that wellness policy that we spoke about previously in the previous slide. Those wellness policies were specific to the school district, and the wellness policy was really up to whatever the school district decided for that nutrition standard to be. So this Smart Snack basically implemented national standards for those foods and beverages sold outside the breakfast and lunch program. So it was no longer individualized or determined by the district level or the school level, as some schools just chose to say, there'll be no nutrition standards for any kind of food items or beverages sold outside of the school lunch program. This established very specific standards that they had to abide by. The Smart Snack standards reduce most sugary beverages and reduce the sugar and calorie content from most food products that would be served outside of the school lunch program. So did the act work as it had hoped or it has intended? So there's been a couple studies since this act has been put into place. There was a study done in 2020, the impact of the Healthy, Hunger-Free Act on obesity trends. And it found that for children in poverty, the odds of having obesity prior to the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act had been increasing year after year. But after implementation of the act, that rate of obesity for the same population did decline. It was about 9% lower. So it was showing that exposure to more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy, and reducing the sugar that may be available in snacks before and after school really did have some impact to those kids who relied on school meals on a daily basis. In 2018, there was a study that looked at the influence or the impact that this act had on participation rates between 2008 and 2015. Essentially, meaning how many kids still would come and eat lunch at school once this new food pattern had been put into place. You know, more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains. Was this really going to be something that kids were going to eat and still allow schools to be successful and be able to acquire enough reimbursement to allow the program to continue? So what this study found was that the school lunch participation rates differed very little across the years, from 70 and it went up to 72%. School breakfast rates did increase from 52 to 59%, meaning they did see some increase from 2008 to 2015, once the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act had been implemented. The Healthy Hungry Free Kid Act strengthened nutrition standards, did not really affect it, and found really students over time are likely to accept healthier options. And here are some references just for you to be aware of. The specific studies that I referenced if you would like more information or would like to read about those studies specifically.